Today, in the cycle of the Church's services and feasts, and in the course of Great Lent, is commemorated Saint Gregory Palamas. It was not always so. Saint Gregory Palamas lived in the 1300s, rather in the 1200s and the 13th century, if I'm not mistaking my dates. So his commemoration was added to a Lenten cycle that already existed. The gospel that we hear is the account of the healing of the paralytic who was brought, and even though the crowd was so much that they could not reach him, they broke through the roof and they lowered him into the midst. They would not be kept away. And this was the theme of the hymns prior to the elevation of Saint Gregory Palamas and to the change of the theme. Now, to preach about Saint Gregory Palamas is always complicated, because what we remember him for is a fine theological distinction. He said that we cannot know God in his essence, but that God reveals himself to us in his energies. And I can tell you, having preached every year for 10 years on this theme, this is the point at which I see people's eyes glaze over. It's theological language, it's jargon, it's a technical term. If you don't like mechanics, then I'm not even going to talk, because I can't speak mechanics. But every profession has its jargon. So Matt, you fix appliances. You start talking to me about sensors, and my eyes glaze over. Tom, you're a plumber. You start talking to me about the technical terms of this. I have no clue what the difference between this kind of joint and that joint is. And as a priest, I speak about essence and energies, and everyone's gone. Am I wrong? So, there is a fundamental, simpler point that is to be made from this. And it explains why it was that the fathers of the Church assigned St. Gregory Palamas to the Sunday of the paralytic. Because in those days and now, those who like to be smart, which is the temptation we all fall into, were explaining how God, if he is truly God, is so distant from us that we could never know him. Which is true. If God is infinite and we are finite, how could we ever possibly comprehend him? We could know nothing about him, right? If an ant is on the ground and it's looking up at me, all that knows about me is that I'm really big and I'm probably going to step on it, right? This is the most we could possibly know about God, the relationship of the ant to the giant. But if that is the case, why do we come to church? How could we possibly have any interaction with God? And in those days of St. Gregory Palamas, there was a man who was preaching and saying, well, what you have to do is you have to study. You have to go to school. You have to learn everything about God because he can't speak to us himself. He has created intermediaries through which we can know him. Okay, fine. But that really seems as though all the man is saying is, so you can't know God, so listen to me. Right? Which sounds dangerous, because as soon as any man takes this much power to himself, we begin to worry. St. Gregory Palamas says, no. God has revealed himself to us. We can know him, not with our mental faculties, not by study, although it helps. We know him in relationship, in the same way as when I step up to you, When I reach out my hand and we touch, I do not comprehend all of your being. I don't know what's going on in your mind, in your heart, and yet we have touched. We have encountered one another. We know one another. It is a real connection, not a deep one. As we talk, as we converse, we may come to know one another more deeply. It is a relationship that we have with God, not a matter of study and intellectual knowledge, but we touch Him. Rather, He touches us, and we may truly know Him. And this is why the Sunday of the Paralytic is appropriate. There are many barriers that are placed between us and God. Some of them we place ourselves. Our sins, our brokenness, our guilt, our shame. These things may keep us away from God. Others are imposed by those above us who would make themselves the intermediaries between us and God, who would say, "You don't know what you're talking about, so listen to me." This is not to say there are not religious authorities. There are not those who know God more deeply than we do, but it is a knowledge of experience, a knowledge of prayer, a knowledge of relationship, a knowledge of life. And this we may learn and imitate. Because at the end of the day, whatever barriers are set between us and God, first, we must imitate the friends of the paralytic, who would not be turned back by the great crowd or by the height of the home or by the good workmanship of the roof. Although I've always thought maybe it was something of a shoddy roof. They would not be turned away. They brought him, and he was healed. But the other point, the fundamental point, the core of our faith, our life, our hope, and our joy, is that God Himself has torn aside the barriers that separate us from Him. We ran away from Him into this world and gave ourselves over to sin, and He has run after us. He has entered into the creation. In His birth, in His baptism, in His transfiguration, in His crucifixion, and in His resurrection, we see the signs, the tokens, the trophies of His presence in our midst. We cannot ascend to God, but He has come down and dwelt in our midst and gives to us healing and life and love and wholeness and joy. And therefore, on this, the Sunday of the Paralytic, the Sunday of St. Gregory Palamas, the Sunday of high theological language, of essence and energies, let us remember the fundamental truth behind all these things. God is with us. Let us not separate ourselves from Him, but rise and unite ourselves with Him as we approach Holy Communion.